As the city erupted in communal violence, Muslim slaughter of Hindus turned to Hindu slaughter of Muslims. Shankar Ghosh was covering the riots for a Calcutta newspaper.
A jewellery shop was surrounded by a crowd armed with iron rods. An elderly employee, he was already half dead in fear. He came with his folded hands like this. But this furious mob, they had no time to hear what he wanted to say. So I think a boy of 14 or 15 just pulled his leg as he came out, and the man fell down, and someone hit him on the head with an iron rod. I think that one blow had finished him.
Around 5,000 people were killed in 3 days of rioting. But the British, with one eye on leaving India and fearful of being overrun, ordered the troops to stay in their barracks until it was too late.
We had absolute faith in British authority. We had absolute faith in the peace that British had given us. For 3 days there was no sign of authority on the streets, and it was anybody could murder anybody.
The Calcutta killings shattered the hope of the British that they could get out of India quietly and peacefully. With religious hatred and suspicion growing, the dream of a united India seemed to be falling apart. Pran Chopra was a young reporter for All India Radio at the time of the riots.
Until then, there was still a possibility that there could be an undivided India. That impression evaporated in the heat of what came to be known as the Great Calcutta Killings. Once that impact spread through the rest of the country, the hope that India could remain undivided began to vanish.
After Calcutta, the violence spread. In Bihar, Hindus largely massacred Muslims. In Noakhali, in Bengal, it was Hindus who were mostly under attack. With British power waning, India was in danger of falling apart in the chaos of communal violence. One man thought he could bring the country together and maintain the dream of a united India: Mahatma Gandhi. Ashoka Gupta was one of Gandhi's disciples.
After the riots, Gandhiji's attitude was that we are same people, born in the same country, brought up in the same country. We have believed in the community living. Whether you follow this faith or that faith, it doesn't matter. It's the humanity which concerns.
Gandhi spent the first months of 1947 walking through the villages of Noakhali, holding prayer meetings, trying to bring Hindus and Muslims together. Ashoka Gupta went with him.
Gandhi walked from one village to another, and while he walked, he sang. He rested in a Muslim house, then he rested in a Hindu house.
But the great pacifist and campaigner for independence was hardly the unifying figure he wanted to be.
Gradually, the prayer meetings, the non-Hindus were absent.
Shankar Ghosh reported the story for his Calcutta newspaper.
The Muslims were not keen to come to him, were not keen to listen to him. And before Gandhiji went on his morning trip from one village to another, they used to defy the path, spread thorns, bones, etc. on his road. An advance party had to be sent because he was in Noakhali, he was not wearing any shoes. He was walking barefoot.
Gandhi had always opposed constitutional concessions to Muslims. For many of them, he represented Hindu supremacy.
Mr. Gandhi did not appeal to the Muslims, He failed to win the hearts and minds of the Muslims of India, The way he used to talk about politics and his language, it was foreign. It did not appeal to Muslims at all, But he used to be practically, naked. He used to have one arm on the shoulder of one girl, and he should have another arm on the shoulder of another. And the Hindus thought he was a saint,
Gandhi's dream of a united India seemed to be collapsing.
He was a sad man. I think nobody was listening to him. He was considered to be an incorrigible idealist who has no connection with reality.
In February 1947, the British government made a dramatic declaration. They would definitely leave India by June 1948. But there was still no agreement on how to give India to the Indians. With chaos spreading, they decided on a radical solution: to appoint a new viceroy.
The scene is Northolt Airfield, the occasion the departure of Lord Mountbatten of Burma, who was leaving for India with his wife. Before the new viceroy, there lay the task of holding office for the brief but obviously difficult period of just over a year until the date when Indians are to take full control of India. Everyone in Britain, I'm certain, wishes the viceroy all possible success in India.
I was in school, and they said, you'll miss the last term of school, and we're taking you out in the middle of this term because Daddy's been appointed Viceroy of India, and so we're going out for probably a couple of years. And, thought we'd take you as well, because you can be useful.
In March 1947, Mountbatten arrived in India. The former Supreme Allied Commander of Southeast Asia had a reputation for being a decisive leader, a man who could knock heads together. His brief was simple: to get a deal and get Britain out before India imploded.
The swearing in, of course, was a very great ceremony in the Durbar Hall, and so trumpeters and all the staff in their full dress uniform, my father in full dress uniform, my mother in a long white dress, and I think a sort of laurel wreaths in her hair. And they looked like film stars.
The Viceroy, his wife Edwina the Vicereine, and their daughter Pamela moved into Viceroy's house in New Delhi with its staff of 5,000.
In Viceroy's house, there were indoor gardeners. Now, the indoor gardeners just arranged the flowers in the vases and changed the water. And there were 25 of them as indoor gardeners. There was one man who spent his entire time with a seal that bore the British crown, stamping the butter pads. And there was another unfortunate man known as the chicken plucker, who did nothing else. So the scale was so amazing.
Narendra Singh Sarila was to become Mountbatten's aide-de-camp, his personal assistant. Among other things, his job was to assist on tiger hunts.
Lord Mountbatten was a very articulate man, and he used to plan ahead what he's going to do. And he used to carry it through ruthlessly.
Despite the formalities of life at Viceroy's house, Mountbatten seemed like a new breed of Viceroy.
First of all, his background helped him, because everybody knew that he was cousin of the king. But still, he acted without any airs. And I think that impressed Indians, because other viceroys kept, their sort of upper lip and that sort of thing. And I think that helped to impress people.
Well, the first thing that was different with my father and mother was that when they were entertaining, I mean, they were in India, they invited Indians, which had never happened before. I mean, yes, of course, Indian princes were entertained, but the ordinary Indian ministers and lawyers and doctors or whoever had never been invited, so that was quite a new thing.
On the personal level, Dickie was a very charming, very handsome, very lovable person who met one very informally, and when one was very young and rather nervous in front of important people, he could put one at one's ease. He was awfully sweet.
Mountbatten's first task was to meet the Indian leaders, Mahatma Gandhi and Pandit Nehru for Congress, and Muhammad Ali Jinnah for the Muslim League. He hoped his more informal style would give him greater success than his stuffier predecessors.
They sat away from the desks in armchairs and were offered refreshments of some kind, and he would say, well, now, before you put me in the picture politically and in the state of India, do tell me a bit about yourself.
It was a technique that worked with Nehru. The two would become lifelong friends, but it totally failed with Jinnah.
He came out of the meeting afterwards and said to his aides, my goodness, he was cold, cold as ice.
There were now constant negotiations. As a divided India became a real possibility, the political tensions at the centre filtered down to the local level. The Punjab was worst affected. The province was one of the wealthiest in India. Hindus, Muslims and Sikhs all claimed it as their own. The Punjab was home to most of India's 6 million Sikhs, the location of their most holy site, the Golden Temple. The Sikhs' great fear was that if India was divided, the Punjab, with its Muslim majority, would end up in Pakistan. For Sikhs, it was unthinkable that they would be ruled by the Muslims, historically their enemies. In many villages of the Punjab, communal harmony began to break down. Aridaman Singh Dillon was living in a mixed Sikh-Muslim village.
I had Muslim friends and we used to play together. And there was nobody from our families put any obstacles between us. But when the strife began, then I was prohibited from going out with my Muslim friends. But we would sneak away